Well, hi Bushan. It's my pleasure to welcome you today and have the chance to talk with you about your journey towards remote collaboration and remote PA plannings in general. So before we start, I'd like to quickly introduce you to our audience. Yeah, Bushan Kanal, Vice President of Engineering, and already 13 years at ExtraHop. So that shows me that you experienced thinking about going remote, doing safe from the start, and that was why I really was looking forward to have the chance talking to you today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure as well.
So first, I would like to learn a bit more about the history of your safe transformation. So maybe you can quickly share how did that start and what were the main challenges at the beginning?
There's a longer version and shorter version of this, but let me try to maybe to the medium, just the medium version. His ExtraHop, we're located in Seattle. We are in, we build technology around cybersecurity. We provide detections and investigations for large enterprise customers. So that's our kind of the market and our audience. One of the ways that we do kind of solve the problem for our customers is we look at network data. And I'm kind of going a little bit roundabout because I think the context is important here. But our devices, our software methodology is very much about scale. Scale means systems. Systems means complexity. So really, historically, we've been very much a systems-driven company, and the type of problems that we tackled were not exactly something that would automatically lead to agile methodology. So that's kind of where we started. But we also, as we kind of progressed, it was clear to us that we did need to kind of think about iterations and kind of breaking the complexity down, because at the end of the day, whether you're doing systems or web development, you can't do everything at once. You want to make people feel successful. You want to have the teams be independent. So, a lot of the tenets that you see in Agile really translated well to what we wanted to do. So it was really a question of like, how do you connect those two pieces? And it's taken us a while. It's been a slow progression, but we've come quite a long ways in terms of kind of going in terms of thinking, in terms of how do you think about iterations, just as I think they call program increments. How do you make teams successful? How do you kind of make teams independent? So it's we're talking about PA Planner, but there's a culture that is associated with this type of thinking as well that we've really developed, and we feel like we've come quite a ways, and especially right now coming to PA planning, timing wise with COVID, when some of the other externalities that we're all kind of dealing with, kind of provided this sort of a problem that really this level of thinking really kind of helped us deal with it in a much more efficient way.
I know that ExtraHop and you already before the pandemic thought about doing things remotely. What were the reasons?
Just capacity. You can only put so many people in the room. So we even when we didn't have the pandemic, the way we kind of thought about it was a bit of a success problem would be a good way of putting it. We found this, the planning that we're doing, the big room planning was working. It was working for what we wanted to achieve. And we had more and more teams being involved. So naturally that kind of creates, constraints around space and, like physics, like noise, you can't hear people, it's too loud. So all these sort of things really kind of came into play as we had more and more people. So even before the pandemic, we were kind of thinking, well, this is good, we find it successful, but how do we really kind of get all of the teams involved and make them successful as well? So, we're kind of already kind of reaching that point where we're thinking about, well, we need to kind of scale, kind of take it to the next level. And we were not quite ready to make that jump yet. We were kind of doing different meeting rooms with Zoom, just to kind of have people connected. So, it was somewhat of a workaround, if you would say. So then the pandemic hit, and that was it. Then that kind of forced that decision to be forced that decision on us.
But still, what I was wondering, as you mentioned before, you're a highly tech-driven company in general. What was the reaction from the developers going remotely that fast, even before the pandemic? What was the reaction? How did you achieve that you got full commitment from them?
So we weren't completely remote before. Just to kind of context here, remote was even more sudden because we kind of historically, I mean, maybe this will highlight the point. We kind of went. It was very binary for us, to be honest with you. So we had some people that were remote that made a sort of life choice of going to a different city, and we supported them. But for the most part, culturally, we were quite a bit. We were really a company that thrived in interactions, physical interactions, being in the office. So about 90% or even higher of our employees or engineering department were actually in person. So we ended up going remote, but I think this highlights the point of why we needed some of these tools. But previously we were sparsely remote. So, but to answer your question, when we did go remote, you know, I think it was a big change for everybody involved, but people were able to kind of make the change successfully. We adapted. As human beings, you adapt, and so did we. So it was, yeah. So I think I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but we did make the change. It was one of those decisions that were, people adapted, people understood what they needed to do. I think in the end, when you have sort of alignment, hey, this is a problem we need to solve. I think there was a certain amount of agreement for everybody to make things work in the way that everybody's successful. So people work from their dining rooms. People work from their, this is a story probably said by many different companies, and we try to support our employees with as many tooling as possible to make that transition as easy as we can. But there's a lot of willingness on them saying, hey, this business still needs to keep running. So how do we get out of this?
Yeah, just coming in my mind from the other perspective, from management team's perspective, how was that tackled? Well, regarding trust in employees, have you done or used specific methods or approaches to deal with it?
That part was easy. I mean, easy in the sense that we didn't have to do things very differently. Because if you think about how we were kind of planning and organizing work and kind of understanding delivery, we were already doing that ahead of time. So in some ways, I mean, we give a lot of freedom to the engineers, saying, hey, we're not going to tell you what time to come, but here's a certain level of commitment that you've said you will do, and we hold them. We try to make sure that they deliver on the things that they feel that they can, and it's we have people that are high achievers, and they solve the problem themselves, really. Sometimes when we didn't really have to kind of, there's no difference in trust. It's just like, people were doing what they were doing at office. They were just doing it from home. And there's a delivery, there's a commitment, there's planning. So, all of that kind of, that's what really matters for us. Like, how do we deliver customer value? How do we get to the result? And, Jesse, our CTO and founder, he understands that. So that really made that conversation much easier. It was not a conversation about like, what are you doing from home? When are you working? But it was more along the line of, hey guys, this is what we need to do this quarter, and how do we get there? And who can take on some of these tasks? So that's how we thought about it, and it worked out, and it still works out today.
That brings me to the PI planning app, and at some point I remember that when Robert contacted me and said, well, I would like to see that solution. What was the triggering aspect on your side to think, hey, we need to look for a supporting tool?
I remember it was sometime in March, and it's one of those events that everybody can experience together. We're sort of hearing things were happening, but we weren't sure how it would impact us. And we started doing kind of, okay, what if scenarios, and at one point we said, well, we were lucky enough that, on March, we were just kind of when the pandemic came, we were just thinking about planning. So it was kind of top of mind. Then I recall at the leadership level, we said, let's just plan for not being in the office in the whole quarter. What do we need to do if we didn't have to? It kind of occurred to us, like, we should kind of think about the worst case here, right? And we did. then naturally we said, well, we can, if we have this tool, we can do this in the office or not. But if we're not, at least we have a pretty good insurance. It's more work, but it is an insurance, and that's how it came about. So it was kind of the worst case thinking that we said, well, what happens if we're not there in a week, as we thought we would at that time? We'll be back in a week. But what if it's longer than a week? As it turns out, it was a lot longer than a week. So that's really how it came about, Robert. We were already doing the methodology. So the methodology wasn't not, people understood what they needed to do. So that helped a lot. It was just a question of like, hey, now we do the same thing using this different tooling. So that, it was a pretty sudden change. We kind of went from, doing everything on the board to physical boards, to the PI planner tool.
I mean, that was at the beginning, March last year, right? And I mean, what was the immediate impact then, or the reaction back then from the different teams, and what is the impact and reaction today? Has that changed in a way?
The reaction, this is more of a compliment. The reaction was like, there wasn't much, which meant that we were able to maintain status quo in terms of what we thought would be success, right? Meaning, like, here we are, we used to be at the office, and we're not, but we still did what we needed to do, which was a huge success. So in some ways, I don't know if I'm answering that in a way that maybe it doesn't come across in a way that I'm intending to. The fact that we were able to kind of maintain status quo was huge, because the background here is like, nobody's at the office, right? Everything's online, and we had never done this before. Clearly there were some quirks. There are things that tooling, Zoom issues and whatnot. But as with anything you do for the first time, you figure it out, you learn. But the end result, we really came out of that saying, hey, we felt successful in terms of what we needed to do in terms of planning for the next quarter, or for the quarter coming.
When you look back to those PI plannings you had remotely together with the PA planning app, and I also know you're heavily using Zoom as well with the breakout rooms. What would you say are the three key benefits of the PI planning app?
The integration with Jira is very important, because we already had a really strong workflow in Jira. So the more connected the tool is with Jira, the less work. It removes friction from what we did. And I know that it doesn't really speak much for the features, because I develop features. I have engineering teams that develop features, and the last thing my engineering team wants to hear is like, it's the connection with another product that really makes my product better. But it in the way that it sort of enables all these things, right? Like it's all the work that you guys have already did really kind of comes into fruition. Is put it another way. But from a as an engineering manager or leadership perspective, the integration was key, because it really enabled us to have higher level productivity and really kind of utilize all the tools. Now, in terms of the tooling itself, I think it's easy to use, and it's very intuitive in terms of how it works. Similar to how we do with the stickies in the board. I think that's very powerful. The program level, the way you look at it, it's at the program level, it really translated well in terms of what we do, how we work with the feature teams. And it worked. I mean, the Zoom breakout rooms really worked out really well. I jump around. I have 2 or 3 teams that I work with, and I kind of jump around during planning from one to the other. and you know the the programs, each of the sort of feature team, the program level increments, how you kind of look at it, and how the Zoom breakout rooms works and how the feature team works really kind of aligns very well in terms of the tooling, to allow us to do what we need to do, and that's a pretty big positive as well. And we do a lot of roaming as well, and it really allowed us to kind of like map the dependencies. So I think that's also really important for us because we tend to be pretty matrixed. So the third one would be just the fact that you guys have done a really good job of mapping the dependencies and to be able to do the roam the risks. That's something I don't know if other users are necessarily value, but we do, because like everybody can build software. The hard part is understanding dependencies, understanding kind of like what are the risks, to do that, because it's not, a lot of times we find out it's not the fact that it's not software engineering. We've done this many times. It's all the other aspect of it that kind of prevents you from doing what you wanted to do in the first place. And those are like dependencies and understand the risks, risks that you control and then you don't. And the tooling really allows us to do that very well.
Are you also using it to prepare PI planning and also during the PI execution? In what sense? I mean, I'm especially thinking, of course, about the program board during PI execution. Is that something you can share? Any good practice?
Again, having the integration really allowed us to kind of make that transition smooth, really, with Jira, because we do a lot of planning on Jira to begin with. And the workflow that we have kind of goes from at the portfolio level, even the program level, we'll look in Jira, then it comes into PI Planner. And having that integration really saves a lot of time, saves a lot of Robert's time, actually, not so that he doesn't have to do a lot of duplicated effort.
I definitely also want to talk a bit about the future. And from your perspective, I mean, we are now 1.5, even more years in this kind of special situation. What do you think this remote PI planning or remote collaboration is that something here which is here to stay, or will it at some point getting back to, well, I don't want to say normal, but back to the old habits? What do you think?
I'm not a fortune teller, so take it for what it's worth. But as they say, the cat's out of the bag, meaning like the point here is like, it was a forced experiment for the entire world, and the things that we didn't want to do or things that we didn't think would work, we were forced to experiment with, and I think some of these things will stay, right? It's productivity, it's worked well, and some things that we realized we didn't think we missed, we do miss. So I think it's going to be a bit of a hybrid, and space is always a constraint, and these tools really allow us to work pretty efficiently, even when you're in the same building, really. So I see us, even if we're not, it's somewhat orthogonal from remote. It's just, once you kind of get used to sort of using the tool, it's less about where you're working from, more about how do you want to collaborate. And I think this provides a platform that allows you to collaborate really pretty efficiently, right? And we'll see what happens when everybody goes to work. But I suspect that people will be probably in their own cubicles and using the tool so they can hear each other better rather than having to shout on a big room. I mean, it's it's interesting because like some of the people that didn't really have a loud voice, we can hear, and it sort of works around some of the impedance mismatch that we used to have previously. So really, it's less about remote work and more about what makes us productive. So I suspect that there's going to be a mix of both.
That's a great last sentence. I would like to keep that. And Bhushan, that was great talking to you. So thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.